In this video, we're going to look at aspects of organizational leadership, including differentiation between leadership and management, various approaches to leadership or leadership styles, the roles of power and trust in terms of leadership, strategies for developing and maintaining trust, and lastly, pulling it all together with recommendations for effective leadership. You have the slides in case it's helpful for note-taking purposes. If you like text to accompany the recording, I encourage you to watch the video with the captioning turned on. That's definitely my preferred approach, but you should do whatever works best for you. So first off, is leadership just management? No. They share certain qualities, like involving authority and having some degree of power, but being a leader is different than being a manager. Management is a role you're hired to fulfill that involves directing, controlling, organizing, and coordinating employees. Leadership, on the other hand, is a social process in which there's some degree of interdependence and oftentimes more focus on modeling, influence, and trust. So leadership is a social phenomenon in which people work together to achieve shared goals. In management, the manager's goal may be different than the employee's goal, which may be simply to get paid and keep their job. Unlike managers who are typically assigned to the role, leaders are born based on their personal characteristics and ability to inspire, innovate, and transform. They might be in a position of management, or they might lead people who are on the same level of the hierarchy as they are. Similarly, managers derive their power from the role itself. They are hired into positions of authority and then typically use a system of rewards and punishments to ensure compliance from their subordinates. Leaders, on the other hand, gain power through the perception of competence, expertise, charisma, communication style, etc. Leaders are able to motivate their workforce. With globalization and the rise of multinational organizations, the need for leaders who can understand, work with, and anticipate the needs of a wide range of people is highlighted. This takes adaptability, vision, collaboration, values orientation, accountability, openness, and a well of inspiration. Managers can also be leaders, but one can be a manager without acceptance from employees, in which case they manage but do not lead. Some styles of leadership resemble or overlap with management more than others. Let's review some of the main approaches to leadership in the workplace. There's no singular best way to lead, and there are more leadership styles than we can cover in a brief video. So let's look at some of the most well-known approaches. First, the autocratic or directive leader is somewhat akin to the authoritarian parenting style, which is to say, highly directive and low warmth. It's the do-as-I-say approach. This style can work well, for example, in the military or in first responder situations. Some positive aspects of the autocratic leadership style are that the organizational rules and specific protocol are clearly enforced, which reduces ambiguity that could be harmful in emergency situations and/or in organizations in which following rules is paramount. Another benefit is that some employees like the clarity and predictability that comes with having a singular leader who enforces a set of streamlined expectations. There's little pressure in terms of navigating the complexity of more collaborative leadership environments, and little expectation for going above and beyond. You simply need to do the role the way you were told to do it. This form of transactional leadership most closely resembles management, in that it relies on rewards and punishments rather than inspiration and connection. It comes with drawbacks such as stifling innovation, creativity, and collaboration, and coming across as a dictator instead of an empathic and personable leader. Employees are also at risk of feeling overworked and underappreciated. The polar opposite of the authoritarian approach of the autocratic leader is the laissez-faire or delegative leadership style. This approach is similar to the permissive parenting style, basically warm but very hands-off, as compared to the authoritarian parenting style that's very hands-on and strict, but cold. The good news for employees is that they have freedom and autonomy, but the bad news is that this can be scary if you lack the competence or skills to be successful without guidance and constructive feedback. Leaving employees to their own devices can also create interpersonal challenges because there's no clear hierarchy or decision-making tree. So who takes ownership of projects and who is ultimately responsible for the outcomes? As you might imagine, this approach is most successful if the employees are confident, competent, and motivated. Otherwise, they need more feedback, direction, and involvement. Unlike the authoritarian style of the autocratic leader or the permissive style of the laissez-faire leader, the democratic or participative leader takes a more collaborative approach. They seek to understand and involve the full team. Democratic leaders are effective at creating collaboration and cultivating a culture that is inviting and inclusive. However, as you probably know if you've ever tried to get a large group of people on the same page, this is not the most efficient approach to leadership. It's quite hard to not only get everyone's input, but to find ways of compromising such that everyone's contribution is valued equally. So the pros are inclusivity, engagement, loyalty, and if time allows, probably great decision-making and teamwork. But the cons are slow and potentially impractical, particularly for fully remote companies who have fewer opportunities for spontaneous collaboration, which makes it even more difficult for everyone to share their input and participate in the decision-making process efficiently. Lastly, transformational leaders and their close counterpart, the authoritative leader, are vision-forward mentors. These approaches take confidence because you have to be clear and optimistic about the roadmap in order to inspire your employees to come along for the ride. Leaders who take this approach act as mentors to their employees. Their goal is to motivate them to travel on the journey towards shared goals. Uncertainty is hard for most people, so your team really has to see your vision. And to be effective, leaders need to ensure that these goals are a shared purpose for everyone on the team. Unlike transactional leaders who rely on extrinsic rewards and punishments, transformational leaders look to inspire intrinsic motivation towards goals, growth, and learning. In this approach, employees must feel that their input matters, otherwise it's just you telling them what to do. As a visionary, these leaders also have to know their employees, involve them in the decision-making, and support them in being successful. The major difference between transformative and authoritative leaders is that the transformational leaders do not necessarily have to determine the vision. It could be someone else's vision or the business's vision when they were hired to lead. Nonetheless, they want to make that vision a reality, and to do so, they are highly encouraging, respectful, and committed to supporting their employees and being their best selves. Transformational leaders are also the most likely to emphasize change, particularly in terms of growth and learning. Essential to that, then, is creating an environment of safety and authentic relationships characterized by trust, admiration, respect, and open communication. They also have to know their individual employees well in order to help them develop and utilize their strengths while also identifying and addressing their weaknesses. To make the big picture work, every employee needs to contribute and be held accountable for their part. To be a transformational leader, it needs to be authentic. You are a role model, an inspiration, and a flowing source of passion and enthusiasm for the team. Your number one goal is to bring everyone together with a shared vision for the future, to maintain open communication, and to develop true bonds not only between you and your employees, but between every member of the team as well. Employees who are led by these types of leaders tend to feel supported, respected, and committed to the organization's goals, which supports less turnover and better performance. Like I said, there are many other types of leadership styles and ways of thinking about leadership, such as the coaching style, that you'll read about in some of the other assigned materials this week. Relationships can be thought of as a dynamic between two factors, closeness or connection, and power or control. With power comes responsibility, and in the case of leadership, the responsibility is to balance authority and status with developing trusting and cooperative relationships. Female and minority leaders need to be particularly cautious because their kindness may be viewed as weakness or lack of competence, but if they don't act warmly enough, their high standards and level of achievement are more likely to be interpreted as being cold, unlikable, and bossy. Leaders are in a position of authority and thus have power over those they lead. This can be a challenge for leaders because while having power can feel good, being subjected to someone else's power can be met with negativity and resistance. This power can corrupt people because it allows the leader to influence others in ways that may not be in their best interest. It's also associated with valuing people less due to the enhanced focus on self-perception and, at times, attempts at psychologically distancing themselves from those they lead. People with power also tend to pay less attention to others, use stereotypes more often, and behave in more socially inappropriate ways, presumably because their power protects them from the negative consequences of doing so. Dr. Keltner is a professor of psychology at Cal Berkeley who has spent quite a bit of his career studying power. In his book, The Power Paradox, he describes how power can tip the balance away from the behavioral inhibition system, which is sensitive to threat, towards the behavioral approach system, which is sensitive to reward. In doing so, people with power become more focused on rewards, both materially and socially. And since they have power, they will not encounter as much interference on the way to accessing these rewards. This effect is so powerful that it can be simulated in laboratory settings. In these studies, even randomly assigning someone to a high-power role is associated with talking more and censoring themselves less, while those assigned to a low-power role experienced higher rates of anxiety about potential interpersonal conflict. There's an interactional effect to this finding, which is that those higher in the personality trait of dominance are more affected by positions of power than those who are naturally less dominant. And it can also create a self-fulfilling cycle in that those with less power are more likely to self-censor, which means they participate less and challenge the status quo less, which ultimately serves as an obstacle to gaining more power. This is where my comments in earlier videos about the benefits of low agreeableness can come into play. A recent study by Lin and Schmid 2022 suggests that the relationship between power and approach motivation may reflect differences in personality traits, and that those with higher power may be more attentive to rewards in the first place. Perhaps positions of power are attained by those who have a stronger approach motivation towards goal achievement in the first place. This may align with findings from Thoma et al. 2017 that found that people in positions of power demonstrate increased salience of competence, compared to those with lower power who place more influence on warmth. This may help drive their approach motivation in the realm of competence compared to being liked or viewed as warm. Another interesting intersection of personality and power is that people in positions of power who are less confident in their role are more likely to use coercive tactics than those who are confident. People with less power are also more affected by situational variables than those with more power. That means it's easier to come across as authentic once you already have power because the contextual factors will have less sway over how you act. Cho and Keltner, 2020, differentiate social power from personal power, social power being the power over others, and personal power being freedom from others. This power, either social, personal, or in many cases both, is associated with paying less attention to others in social contexts. That is, unless something in the social environment is potentially useful to them, in which case they'll selectively attend to the emotions and behaviors of the less powerful people in the room. Interestingly, high-power people are also stricter judges of morality of lower-power people, but do not apply those standards to themselves, referred to as moral hypocrisy. High-power individuals need to be aware of these tendencies and seek to improve in their interpersonal skills and perspective-taking in order to be effective leaders. Yin et al. 2022 wrote, quote, "As subordinates see others as having less choice and thus blame them less than power holders do, they may perceive their managers as punishing others unfairly. Power holders should thus keep in mind how much more choice they have than their subordinates, especially when evaluating them." End quote. Leaders need to be hyper-aware of their biases and the likelihood that their choices are interpreted in ways that may differ from how they might themselves view it. A recent study by Brinke and Keltner 2020 found that individuals with lower status are more likely to view other people's power from a cynical standpoint. They tend to view the use of power as coercive rather than collaborative and express less trust in the leader when they are interpersonally warm. This is a hurdle that can only be overcome by consistent, authentic, and deliberate attempts at building trust with all team members. And this is arguably the most important role that a leader plays in an organization, creating real and safe relationships and overall cultivating a culture of inclusivity and inspiration. Doing so not only creates better relationships at work, it also sets the foundation for innovation, improved performance, and the ability to manage complex tasks. Think about how you feel when someone does not treat you well. Are you at your best mentally and physically? Probably not. Another helpful strategy for developing trusting relationships is mirroring, which is a core aspect of the active listening we looked at in the communication at work video. Since people in positions of power have a tendency towards less mirroring and less interpersonal sensitivity, this is a crucial skill to develop if it does not come naturally, and even if it does, it can always be developed further. Keltner 2016 reports that people in corporate positions of power are 3 times more likely to interrupt their coworkers, to multitask during meetings, to raise their voices, and to say insulting things at the office. These are choices, and in the control of the leader to address in order to maximize their effectiveness as leaders and their employees' effectiveness in their roles as well. Kellner recommends practicing empathy, gratitude, and generosity as strategies for combating the temptation to use power negatively. Research has also shown that oxytocin, a chemical naturally produced in the body, is released when people feel trusted and when they trust others. This so-called bonding hormone then leads to increased generosity, empathy, cooperation, collaboration, open sharing of information, and acceptance of feedback. Exactly what you want from your team. Paul Zach's Harvard Business Review article, The Neuroscience of Trust, explores the various ways in which developing trust in organizations facilitates improved outcomes. It cites the following statistics. High-trust companies compared to low-trust companies report 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, 40% less burnout, and 70% higher alignment with their company's purpose. Wow! It also mentions that since high stress inhibits oxytocin release, stress typically decreases empathy, which harms relationships. So developing trusting relationships can help offset some of the negative effects of stress in the workplace. In the Neuroscience of Trust article, Zach suggests the following recommendations for developing and maintaining trust in organizational settings. First, actually care about your team members and intentionally build relationships with them. Express interest in their lives and encourage bonding among all team members. Next, model vulnerability. Leaders need to be open and real, which takes vulnerability to do. They also need to be willing to ask for help and be honest about their limitations, which not only helps develop trust and credibility, but also gives their employees the message that they too can ask for help and share about the challenges and concerns they might be experiencing. Share information widely so everyone knows the company's plans, goals, strategies, etc. Don't create silos of information or leave employees feeling unsure. The sense of unpredictability will only add to their stress, and uncertainty, as we know, is harmful to trust and work performance. Recognize achievements publicly, celebrate personal successes and excellence, and share their strategies with the team. It's particularly impactful if peers are involved. The recognition is soon after the goal was reached, and that the reward is both personal and tangible. Ensure that tasks fall into that sweet spot between too challenging and too easily attainable. Difficult but achievable is the amount of challenge that is optimally motivating. And in team scenarios, this level of difficulty works well for enhancing social bonds. Working together towards a shared goal in which there's interdependence is one of the best ways for people to develop liking and bonding. Leaders need to check in regularly enough to ensure that the task remains in that eustress zone. Give people some discretion and freedom to the extent possible when completing their tasks. Remember what we talked about in terms of control and stress? Yeah, people like to feel that they have control in their lives and will likely trust leaders who trust them enough to be autonomous to a degree. That autonomy not only pays off with deeper trust, but also establishes a culture of innovation because it gives employees space to give their 2 cents and to drive the boat at times. Accountability without micromanaging is possible and beneficial. Speaking of autonomy, another strategy is to enable job crafting, which is the involvement of the individual employee in shaping their job role according to their preferences and strengths. Lastly, leaders should aim for whole person growth. This goes back to our discussions of motivation in the workplace and its impact on all areas of job performance and satisfaction. It's not enough for leaders to care about professional growth. They also need to help their team members develop as people, which means supporting their ability to achieve growth in other areas like family, spirituality, and recreation. What else can you do to help ensure that your leadership is effective? In addition to being mindful of your use of power and intentional efforts at developing trust, leaders need to create space for social support that does not need to involve them. Employee resource groups can be an awesome way of bringing employees together around topics that have shared relevance, whether that's neurodiversity, LGBTQIA+, sustainability, people of color, working parents, veterans, mental health, or whatever else your employees could bond over and value sharing with their team members. As stated earlier, leaders need to be willing to be vulnerable, including acknowledging what they do not know and making space for difficult conversations. They need to ensure that their employees feel safe to share challenging feedback, admit mistakes, and take risks in terms of trying new approaches or offering suggestions. Additionally, by modeling openness to feedback, leaders send the message that feedback is a good thing, which may shift the balance in terms of how the employees then receive feedback. They are also more likely to see feedback as constructive and helpful if you too approach feedback from that standpoint when it's directed your way. Part of vulnerability is being transparent and honest. If you're not feeling well that day, for example, let people know it's not personal. Don't give them a chance to jump to those conclusions, especially if they don't know you well yet. Leaders need to be prepared for conflict. It is inevitable. What differs between people is how they handle it. Not all conflict can be resolved, but can always be met with an open space for rich and meaningful dialogue. Recognizing that conflict resolution and problem solving should be collaborative rather than manipulative goes a long way in effectively resolving or at least ameliorating issues. Lead with empathy. It's hard to work for people who do not seem like they care about how you feel or experience the workplace or their leadership style. And remember to give employees autonomy and agency where it's appropriate. Empower employees to feel powerful too. Leadership should also be forward-thinking, looking at the future and anticipating the changes that might be needed based on those expectations. This means training your workforce to be prepared for the future proactively rather than waiting until it's needed and constantly fighting fires rather than preventing them. It also means getting everyone on board and supporting a culture of mutual interdependence in terms of shared values, goals, interests, and beliefs. Be open-minded about the diversity of perspectives that are present in any work group and embrace them. The goal is not to make everyone think alike, but rather to engage in perspective-taking, understand the various viewpoints and needs, and find the right strategies for facilitating everyone's sense of safety, motivation, and overall stage set for successful performance. This open-mindedness helps to communicate that you value everyone's perspective and welcome them in an inclusive way by embracing their unique viewpoints and committing to cultivate an organizational culture that values each employee's contributions. Diversity without appreciation and support is performative and harmful. On the other hand, when diversity is central in an organization's values and prioritized as such, it is a crucial element in driving innovation, creativity, and success. To do so, leaders need to lead with curiosity, accountability, and true intentionality in terms of hiring, evaluations, promotions, and all other aspects of organizational decision-making. Different perspectives, skills, styles, etc. should not just be allowed or accepted. They should be embraced and celebrated.